The Britain's Got Talent studio carried its familiar Tuesday afternoon energy as Simon Cowell settled into his judge's chair for what he anticipated would be another routine day of auditions. It was a cool June afternoon in 2024, and the iconic red curtains framed the stage where countless dreams had been both realized and shattered over the years. Simon adjusted his signature black t-shirt and took a sip of his tea, mentally preparing himself for the parade of hopeful performers that awaited. At 64 years old, Simon had built his empire on a foundation of harsh criticism and public humiliation that had redefined television entertainment. His brand of cruelty had spawned countless imitators and had fundamentally changed how reality television operated. He took pride in being an industry innovator, believing that his uncompromising standards had elevated the quality of entertainment. He was completely unprepared to learn that educational professionals were using him as an example of everything wrong with modern media. 6-year-old Charlotte Davies from Cardiff was not scheduled to perform. She had come to watch the taping with her mother, Sarah Davies, a primary school teacher who had brought her daughter during the school holidays as a special treat. Charlotte was an unusually articulate child, with auburn hair and bright hazel eyes that reflected both intelligence and a strong sense of right and wrong that had been carefully cultivated by her educator mother and progressive school environment. What made Charlotte's presence particularly significant was her recent exposure to media literacy education at her forward-thinking primary school. Her teacher, Mrs. Rebecca Williams, had been conducting age-appropriate lessons about how television and media influence society, using various programs and personalities as case studies to help children understand concepts like kindness, bullying, and the difference between entertainment and cruelty. The audition process was running smoothly when a teenage singer took the stage for what should have been an encouraging performance. The 17-year-old boy was clearly nervous, and when his voice cracked slightly during an emotional ballad, Simon's reaction was swift and devastating. "That was painful to listen to," Simon announced with his characteristic venom. "You've just demonstrated exactly why karaoke should remain in bars and not attempt to masquerade as professional entertainment. The pitch problems alone were enough to make my ears bleed." The teenager's face crumpled as Simon's words hit him like physical blows. The young man struggled to maintain his composure as the criticism continued to flow. "Frankly," Simon pressed on, "whoever encouraged you to pursue singing professionally has done you a tremendous disservice. You lack the basic vocal control necessary for anything resembling a career in music, and your stage presence suggests you'd be more comfortable hiding behind a microphone than performing in front of one." Charlotte watched this interaction with the focused attention of someone who had been taught to analyze media content critically. She recognized the dynamic immediately from her school lessons about television personalities who built their careers on making others feel bad about themselves. As Simon prepared to deliver what appeared to be a final crushing blow to the already devastated teenager, Charlotte stood up in her seat and called out in the clear, penetrating voice that only small children possess, "Mr. Simon! Mr. Simon!" Simon, always slightly annoyed by interruptions during his critiques, looked toward the small girl with visible irritation. "Yes, what is it?" Charlotte looked directly at Simon with those bright hazel eyes and spoke with the innocent directness that only children possess. "My teacher says you're what's wrong with TV." The studio fell into complete stunned silence. The statement hung in the air like an academic verdict that couldn't be dismissed. Simon felt as though he had been struck by a professional assessment delivered through the mouth of a 6-year-old. This child had just told him that educational professionals were using him as an example of media toxicity in elementary school curricula. "What did you say?" Simon asked, his voice carrying a mixture of shock and growing unease. Charlotte repeated her statement with the confident clarity of someone sharing important information. "My teacher, Mrs. Williams, says you're what's wrong with television because you make money by being mean to people, and that teaches children that cruelty is entertaining." Simon felt something cold and horrible settle in his stomach as this 6-year-old essentially reported that he was being discussed in educational settings as a negative influence on society and childhood development. "Your teacher said what, exactly?" Simon pressed, though part of him dreaded hearing more. Charlotte's answer revealed the extent of academic criticism being directed at his influence. "She showed our class clips of your show to teach us about the difference between constructive criticism and bullying. She said that you represent how television has gotten confused about the difference between being honest and being cruel." Simon felt his hands begin to tremble as this child essentially told him that educators were using his behavior as a textbook example of what was wrong with modern entertainment culture. Mrs. Williams said. Charlotte continued with the thorough recall of someone who had found the lesson particularly important, that people like you have made television a place where hurting people's feelings is considered fun, and that's teaching children that meanness is normal and acceptable. Simon felt his composure beginning to crumble as this 6-year-old delivered what amounted to a comprehensive academic condemnation of his entire career and its societal impact. The audience watched in growing amazement as Britain's most powerful media figure seemed to be having an emotional breakdown in response to a child's innocent sharing of classroom lessons. "Charlotte," Simon said, his voice becoming increasingly unsteady, "what else did your teacher say about me?" Charlotte's response revealed that his influence had been analyzed extensively. She said that your kind of television creates a culture where people think it's okay to tear others down for entertainment, and that children who watch shows like yours start to think that being mean makes you powerful and successful. Simon felt tears beginning to form as this child described the broader cultural impact of his approach to entertainment. The idea that his behavior was influencing children to see cruelty as a path to success was devastating. And Charlotte added with the innocent honesty of childhood, "Mrs. Williams said that people like you have made television less about celebrating human talent and more about watching people get humiliated, which is bad for everyone's hearts and minds." Simon felt something fundamental break inside him, as this 6-year-old essentially accused him of corrupting the entire purpose of entertainment and damaging the collective emotional well-being of society. "Charlotte," Simon asked, his voice shaking, "what did your class think when your teacher explained this?" Charlotte's answer revealed that even young children could see the problems with his approach. Most of us agreed that making people cry on TV isn't fun to watch, and that it would be better if shows tried to help people feel good about themselves instead of bad. Simon looked at this remarkable child who had essentially delivered a comprehensive academic and moral critique of his life's work, and felt completely overwhelmed by the implications of what she was telling him. "Mrs. Williams said," Charlotte continued, "that the best entertainment brings out the best in people, but your kind of television brings out the worst in people by making cruelty seem entertaining and normal." Simon felt his emotional dam burst completely as this 6-year-old told him that educators viewed his influence as fundamentally corrupting to human decency and social behavior. Standing up from his chair, Simon walked toward Charlotte with tears streaming down his face. "Charlotte, what would your teacher say I should do if I wanted to stop being what's wrong with television?" Charlotte considered this question with the seriousness of someone who had been taught to think about solutions as well as problems. "Mrs. Williams says that people who have influence should use it to help others feel valued and supported, not to make them feel worthless. She says that real entertainment should celebrate human potential, not destroy human dignity." Simon felt the full weight of this child's message. This 6-year-old was essentially providing him with a moral framework for using his platform constructively rather than destructively. "Charlotte," Simon said, kneeling down to her eye level, "do you think someone like me could learn to be part of what's right with television instead of what's wrong with it?" Charlotte's response carried the hope that characterized childhood. "Mrs. Williams says that anyone can choose to use their power to build people up instead of tearing them down, but they have to really want to change, and they have to practice being kind even when being mean feels easier." Simon looked back at the teenage singer who was still standing on stage, clearly devastated by the critique he had received. The boy's expression of defeat and humiliation suddenly seemed like evidence of the cultural damage Charlotte's teacher had described. "I need to apologize," Simon said, walking back toward the stage. "Not just to you," he addressed the teenager, "but to everyone who has been affected by my approach to entertainment. Charlotte has helped me understand that I've been part of a problem rather than part of a solution." The remainder of that day's auditions became an exercise in reconstruction rather than destruction. Simon's critiques focused on potential and possibility rather than failure and inadequacy, creating an atmosphere of support rather than fear. When the episode aired 8 weeks later, it became the most watched and culturally significant segment in the show's history. Charlotte's innocent sharing of her teacher's academic analysis and Simon's emotional breakdown sparked international conversations about the responsibility of entertainment figures, the cultural impact of reality television, and the need for media literacy education. More importantly for Simon personally, the encounter with Charlotte became a catalyst for fundamentally reconsidering his role in the entertainment industry and its broader social impact. "Charlotte didn't attack me personally," Simon would later say in interviews. "She shared what educators were teaching children about the kind of entertainment I represented. That 6-year-old forced me to confront the fact that I had become a symbol of what was toxic about modern television culture." The conversation led Simon to begin working with educators and child development experts to understand how entertainment could be both honest and constructive, maintaining standards while supporting human dignity. 6 months later, Simon invited Charlotte and Mrs. Williams to visit the show. Charlotte was curious to see if Simon had learned to be part of what was right with television instead of what was wrong with it. "Are you still what's wrong with TV?" Charlotte asked with the same directness that had characterized their first meeting. Simon smiled, and his expression seemed genuinely different, warmer and more constructive. "I'm trying very hard to become part of what's right with television, Charlotte. Your teacher taught me that entertainment should help people grow, not tear them down." Mrs. Williams nodded approvingly. "The best entertainment elevates both performers and audiences. When we use our platforms to support human potential rather than exploit human vulnerability, we contribute to a culture of growth rather than a culture of cruelty." The story became a landmark moment in discussions about media responsibility, the cultural impact of reality television, and the importance of media literacy education in helping children understand the difference between entertainment and exploitation. But perhaps most importantly, the conversation demonstrated that sometimes the most important cultural criticism comes through educational analysis shared by those too young to be influenced by celebrity status. In this case, a 6-year-old girl who simply repeated what academic professionals were teaching about the social impact of cruel entertainment, forcing a powerful media figure to confront whether he wanted to be remembered as part of the problem or part of the solution. Charlotte's message about being what's wrong with TV became a touchstone for Simon's ongoing transformation, reminding him that his influence extended far beyond individual performers to shape cultural attitudes about how we treat each other as human beings.